So I like to stock supporting items in the shop. I like everything that I stock to have a theme and there to be enough to build a theme with. We stock the Architect range of military vehicles and low loaders in HO scale, and they also concentrate largely on Deutsche Wehrmacht during the Second World War. It's a fascinating time period and you get a lot of variation, so it does make interesting loads. And to that end, I ordered the Lilliput BL42 and 52 to support them. The big issue with that is that they're both in this winter camouflage, which I realise restricts people in that most people don't build winter layouts. They're very hard to do convincingly. So I went off researching the camouflage on locos to see what was out there. And to be honest, when you start doing an internet search, the first thing you find are lots of models. You don't find the primary references that easily. So this turns out to be based on a camouflage in the Sinsheim Museum. And that loco is based on a couple of very grainy photographs from Königsberg in 1944. So there's a Kriegslock that has been whitewashed in this actual camouflage. But the reality of that loco in 1944 would it probably been whitewashed onto a very dirty loco and done in a hurry. So this is actually too pristine. After quite a lot of digging, I found some useful information. The first group of camouflage locomotives are those for military uses, so they either hold railguns or armoured trains, anti-partisan trains and things like that. Those locos tend to be armoured themselves, so they tend to be encased. There are a few specialist models out there, but mega money. And then there's also quite a few plastic kits out there, but unfortunately in the 1/76 scale, so they won't fit with HO locos very well. So we start looking at the second group of camouflage locos, which it was applied to the general fleet, but only for a short period. So in October 1944, a directive went out to try and camouflage valuable assets. Locomotives up until that time hadn't been individually targeted. The heavy and medium bombers tend to bomb infrastructure and yards. It's only when the fighter bombers get into range of the German fleet that they needed to be camouflaged, and that's quite late on in the war. So the 2nd Tactical Air Force in the west and the Russians in the east. So you get this order going out to camouflage them, but I don't think there's any real guidance as to what to use. So you get a lot of custom jobs. That's where things get quite interesting, certainly for the model maker. It gives you a bit of latitude. A lot of them, because of the winter period, would have been whitewash. But there are others that in the 3-tone Wehrmacht colours, the red, browns, greens and sand colours. So there's a bit of work there for me to do. I've found a few photos with no indication of what colours they are. However, my first sort of guidance is that the majority of locos during the war would have been just in dark grey. So I've taken one of the locos and repainted it completely and given it a lightly weathered finish. So I put some streaks into it, put some rusting on the top surfaces. The one common denominator of all the photographs is that the locos are left very dirty. That probably helps camouflage them as well. On this loco I've also added the coal that came with it, so I quite like the idea of just having a little bit of sort of overflow down the side. It looked quite nice. I did paint the cab, but you really can't see very much of it in there. I did paint the cab roof a white cream colour, and I painted a wooden floor in there, but yes, most of it's hidden unless you go looking for it. So the Lilliput models make a nice basis for this kind of project. They're nowhere near as expensive as the Trix ones. I think they're nicely proportioned, nicely detailed. They've got a good mechanism. There's even a firebox glow in there, which you can see at certain angles. They do have lights, but they have the restricted light leaders anyway, so let's draw it back towards. They are there, but they're not very bright by design. And it took the paint nicely. So this BR52 started out in the winter camouflage. So one of my revelations was that the majority of these locos were built without the smoke deflectors. It was deemed unnecessary at the speeds they were likely to operate at. The other thing that came to me was actually one of the reasons why the camouflage locos I've seen have sort of stood out in they're too clean. It's as simple as that. Part of their camouflage was going to be the filth that they accumulated. Even in the standard grey, they weren't barely looked after, whether that was intentional or just lack of manpower. So it was quite a lot of fun just building up the degrees of wear on it. The coal in the 52 is a more brown coal, so that's a nice different effect from the 42 that I've done. And as I kept adding a bit more rust, I think there's 12 to 15 layers of paint on this now. Yeah, I couldn't do it commercially, but as a one-off, just keep my hand in. It's quite fun. The biggest trouble when you're weathering a loco is telling yourself to stop doing more. But I'm really pleased with how the graduations have all come out. It's not one colour anywhere, it's all got a mixture of greys, of blacks, of rusts, of muds. So here is the other side. I have left the Reich Eagle visible. Thankfully it doesn't have the little symbol beneath it, it's just cross-hatching. Don't want to get into the politics of that, it's a hobby. We're very interested in history. It doesn't mean we want the world to go back to that period of history.